Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. FPL Consult here, and today we're going to take a look at an updated wildcard draft for Game Week 5. Now the reason why I've updated this draft is of course because we have just had the double Game Week 7 announcement. So the fixtures for double Game Week 7 are on the screen right now. We'll go into them in a bit before we take a look at the wildcard team. So hopefully you guys find this video useful, and if you guys do enjoy it, please give it a like and also subscribe as well. If you are new around here, we are on the road to 5,000 subscribers, so hopefully you guys can help me get there before the Game Week 5 deadline. So let's jump straight into this video, and I've put the fixtures for double Game Week 7 here, and I've listed all of them for a reason. Now this is because I do want us to analyze a little bit and take a look at whether obviously the teams that double, right, will be Luton and Burnley, but I want us to take a look at whether we would actually start any of these Luton or Burnley assets ahead of any of our other players from the teams that we are already targeting at this point in time. So just taking a look at some of the bigger teams, you see Arsenal is playing Bournemouth, Manchester United is playing Crystal Palace, Newcastle will be playing Burnley. Assuming by Game Week 7 we have some Newcastle assets, so we would be starting Newcastle assets. Man City will be playing Wolves. So the only one that is slightly difficult would be Spurs and Liverpool, where they play each other, and we may have some assets from these teams. But then again, you can see Spurs and Liverpool being a very high scoring game. So would you really want to bench your attackers for any of the Luton or Burnley assets, etc., right? And then of course Chelsea has Fulham away, which is a good fixture for Chelsea as well. So in general, yes, Luton and Burnley will be doubling in Game Week 7, but the thing that I do want to focus on a little bit as well, right, is that maybe we shouldn't be too hot on these players. I think just because they have a double game week, it does not mean that we have to jump on them at this point in time. If you're not wildcarding, you can consider, ignoring these players, or at least come Game Week 7, if there are issues, maybe you can consider jumping on them. It's nothing to shout about because obviously the fixtures for Burnley is Newcastle in the first game and then Luton away in the second game. For Luton is slightly different. It's Everton away and then Burnley at home for them. So I think comparing these two teams, definitely Luton has the better double. So if I were to target some players from these teams, it would be from Luton Town. So currently that's my thinking, and obviously now if we are wildcarding in Game Week 5, you would naturally have a couple of Luton players, maybe some Burnley assets if you want to, but I think for this draft that I've gone for, I've mainly targeted Luton assets simply because I feel like their fixtures in this double game week is better than the Burnley one, right? And I think Lyle Taylor is probably the only Burnley asset that we want to target. I don't think we'll go for Burnley defenders, maybe Bayer at 4.0, but aside from that, I really don't think Burnley assets would be the ones we're targeting. So specifically from Luton, we will see some players in the Wildcard 5 draft, right? Obviously to try and take advantage of double Game Week 7 if we are wildcarding now in Game Week 5. So that's pretty much my thoughts on double Game Week 7. Let's take a look at some considerations for the Wildcard 5 before we move into the draft. So going back to the question of whether we should wildcard or not, when we are considering this question, I think we should not let double Game Week 7 affect our decision that much. I think it's very usual for all of us to be clouded in our judgment when it comes to a double game week, because obviously there's double the chance for players to get returns. But at the end of the day, we do have to understand that we are talking about teams that have just been promoted, which is Luton and Burnley, and obviously attackingly they are not the best as well, right? And of course defensively they have conceded quite a couple of goals. Both teams have got quite heavy beatings by the Premier League teams as well. So I do feel like double Game Week 7 is not something to shout about. It's definitely something that we can have at the back of our minds, especially if we're wildcarding now in Game Week 5, right? But it should not be the deciding factor whether we should wildcard or not. Right. The next thing that I think we should consider as well is how many major issues we have in our teams. And I say here, we can consider a wildcard if we have more than 4 major issues. Now, when I talk about major issues, I think the what I'm focusing on mainly is players that have suddenly become bad picks, right? And we want to swap them out for good picks. Now, it's definitely a major issue. Is definitely not a case where you're swapping out a good player for a good player. For example, if you're just switching from Bruno Fernandes to Marcus Rashford, I don't think that's a change that is a major issue, right? That's more of a preference kind of thing. But what I mean when I say major issue is, take for example, you went for Diogo Jota at the start. He started a couple of games. In game week 1 he started, in game week 2 he started, and then he fell off the starting 11 in recent game weeks. So if you want to swap Diogo Jota for maybe a James Maddison, for example, then yes, that is a major issue. So this is what I mean by major issues, and I guess you can consider a wildcard if you have more than 4 of them, simply because I think if you have more than 4 of these major issues, the core of your squad is facing kind of quite a huge issue that you have there. So more than 4 of these issues also mean that you will be at least taking a minimum of a -8 if you have 2 free transfers. But for the general population, I think most of us, if we have 1 free transfer going into game week 5, you will already be taking a -12 to replace these 4 major issues. And that's why I have this number here. You can use this as a guide, but obviously it is very, very team dependent, looking at how many issues you have to make, and maybe if you want to swap out some of your fringe players as well, you can consider the wildcard. But in general, I would say that the advantages for a game week 5 wildcard is not that great that we should do it if our teams are in a decent state. Right, and the next thing that we can consider as well, if we are on a game week 5 wildcard, is to be careful of your Newcastle and Tottenham assets. Now, I say this because a lot of us are very hot on Newcastle assets or Tottenham assets right now. Because for Newcastle, they will be having a big fixture swing. The fixtures are starting to look up as well, so a lot of us are targeting those players. Tottenham as well, coming off a 5-2 win against Burnley, it's natural that we would be looking at their assets, especially if they have Sheffield now in game week 5. But I do feel we have to be careful with these assets when we are going into a game week 5 wildcard, because Newcastle do have European games this season. They will be playing in the Champions League, and it's all slot in between the games from the block of game week 5 to game week 8, right? There will be Champions League games. There's also a Carabao Cup against Manchester City for Newcastle, not to forget as well. So there will be heavy rotation, and I think we can expect that some of their assets that we thought would be nailed can be benched, and they have decent alternatives for their starting 11 players as well. So I do feel like Newcastle will see some rotation there. So we do have to be careful how many assets we load up from Newcastle. And also for Tottenham, a lot of drafts that I've seen, whether it's on Twitter or on YouTube, have gone for 2 Tottenham assets or 2 Tottenham attackers, right, in their draft. But I do feel like because they will be playing Arsenal and Liverpool in game week 6 and game week 7, right, immediately after game week 5, I don't see a huge advantage to double up on Tottenham assets if at the end of the day we will be spending a transfer potentially to remove either maybe Son or Maddison if we are doubled up on them come game week 6 and 7, because those are tough fixtures, and I don't think that you would expect Tottenham to score a lot of goals in those games. Now, obviously, there is a chance that could happen, because at the end of the day, Tottenham are a decent attacking side, right? But if we can go for someone else with a better run of fixtures, we can save that free transfer as well and target another player, and that's probably what I'm going to do with this draft. I wouldn't be doubling up on Tottenham assets. Now, something else to consider as well, now that we're wildcarding in game week 5, if you are using the chip, is that there will be another international break coming up really soon between game week 8 and game week 9. Now, this is the second international break of the season, and obviously with international breaks comes injuries and comes other issues that may pop up as well. So this is something that may affect our teams going forward, and maybe if we are wildcarding now in game week 5, we will find it difficult to navigate that international break should we have a couple of injuries. So definitely something to consider there. And also that there will be a bigger fixture swing in game week 9. There is only a mini fixture swing now in game week 5, right, for a couple of teams, but I do feel like the bigger fixture swing that a lot of us will be focusing on is game week 9. So if you are wildcarding now in game week 5, it is important for you to consider this swing in game week 9 and how you can target these teams that will be looking up, and teams that we want to target from game week 9 onwards, and have these players potentially in our drafts already or have a plan to bring them in. So these are my thoughts on what you should consider before you actually hit the wildcard, before you actually activate your wildcard for game week 5. Now let's take a look at the game week 5 wildcard draft that I've updated, and hopefully you guys find that one useful. So this is my updated Game Week 5 draft. If I was to activate my wildcard in Game Week 5, this is something that I would go with. And I do feel like this team looks pretty strong. There are a couple of differentials. Hear me out on them. I will get to each of these players in a bit. So the team value is 100.5 million. Pretty affordable, especially now that most of our team values have risen quite a bit. The formation is still a 3-5-2 because I do feel like the midfield options are still the ones we should be targeting as well. And let's dive into these players. So for keeper pairing, I've gone for Sanchez and Areola. Now there are a lot of other 4.5 keepers that you can go for, but I've chosen to go for Sanchez because Chelsea's fixtures are still looking one of the better ones. And at the end of the day, in terms of expected goals conceded, they actually rank 4th out of all the teams in the Premier League for the first 4 game weeks. So yes, they have been sloppy here and there. Moses Caicedo has made a couple of mistakes. Other players are to blame as well. But in general, they are not conceding a lot of chances. So I do feel like Sanchez will pick up a couple of clean sheets and the fixtures are definitely there for them. So by going for Sanchez as my keeper pairing, I can then free up a defensive spot because I don't have to go for Ben Chilwell anymore. And then for the second keeper, I've gone for Areola on the bench. Definitely one of the better bench keepers. At 4.1, he seems like he's going to keep his spot for West Ham as well. As compared to Turner, he's probably going to lose his spot to Moss as well. Now, in terms of defenders, I've gone for Matty Cash, Udogie, Kieran Trippier, and then on the bench, Estupinian and Anderson from Luton Town. So, talking about the first 3 defenders here on the screen right now, Matty Cash, I've gone for him because Aston Villa's fixtures are starting to pick up. Yes, in Game Week 6 and Game Week 7, slightly tougher fixtures for them, but for the long run, Matty Cash is definitely a player that I think will profit quite a bit because he's playing on the right wing. He's not really playing as a defender. He's not playing a right back position that he usually does. So in terms of attacking threat, I think there's definitely some gains to be made there. And who's to say that Aston Villa can't keep some clean sheets in these couple of game weeks where they have good fixtures. Now, same for Udogie as well, and actually Udogie rotates really well with Estupinian. Now he plays Sheffield in Game Week 5. Come Game Week 6, he has a tougher fixture. You can start Estupinian, who has Bournemouth. So I think that rotation works really well, and that's also kind of why I've gone for Estupinian there on the bench. Post Game Week 9, Brighton's fixtures will start to look up, and that's where Estupinian will come into the starting 11 for this team. So it's important to have Estupinian still in your drafts. And then for Kieran Trippier, I've gone for him 6.5, pretty expensive, but I do feel like Kieran Trippier will continue to tick along because Newcastle's fixtures are looking good. His attacking threat and numbers are still pretty decent. It's dropped a bit from last season, but last season was kind of astronomical numbers for him. This season, against tougher oppositions, mind you, for the first 4 game weeks, he still has done pretty well. So I think Kieran Trippier is a good option, but the thing is, as I mentioned at the start of the video, there could be a major rotation for Newcastle assets, so definitely something to consider. If you guys do feel like Kieran Trippier may be rotated pretty heavily, which is actually my thought, you can actually go for Fabian Schär or Botman, who looks to be dropping in price to 4.4 as well. Now, in terms of the last defensive option, Anderson on the bench, he's from Luton Town. I don't think we want to start him every game week, and even in double game week 7, I don't think Luton will be keeping loads of clean sheets there. But let's say someone gets injured in your starting 11 for any of the attackers or even the defenders, maybe you can consider starting Anderson, who has a double game week. So that's why he's on the bench, just for contingency purposes and just a 4.0 bench fodder. But the thing is, you could want to use him eventually, so just a good option to have because of his double game week 7 there. Now, in midfield, I've gone for Saka, Foden, Rashford, Maddison, and Mbeumo. Now, I'll talk about the non-negotiables first, which is Saka and Mbeumo. For Marcus Rashford, you could go for him or you could go for Bruno Fernandes, but in general, I will still have one Manchester United asset. Now, the reason why I say Saka, Mbeumo, and the Manchester United asset of your choice is non-negotiable is because most of these players are pretty much nailed for 90 minutes. On top of that, their fixtures moving forward look good, and the first 4 game weeks have seen decent data and numbers and returns for these players as well. So for me, these are non-negotiables: Saka, your United asset, and Mbeumo. Now, for the other 2 slots, I've gone for Foden and Maddison. As I said, I wouldn't want to double up on Spurs because in game week 6, 6 and Game Week 7, they have tough fixtures already. So immediately you'll be faced with a case where you have two Tottenham assets, maybe playing against Arsenal and maybe playing against Liverpool. Your team suddenly doesn't look that good, right? So instead of starting with two Tottenham assets and potentially transferring one out after the Sheffield game, I would just start with Phil Foden here and James Maddison. I've chosen Maddison ahead of Son because I do feel like there's no guarantee Son will be playing in the number 9 spot. In terms of long-term potential as well, I think Maddison will continue to take along every single game week because of his routes to points. He's on all set pieces, free kicks, corners, and of course he has a good shot from range as well, which saw him pick up a goal against Burnley. So for long-term prospects, I prefer Maddison. Explosivity wise, definitely Son is the one to go for if you guys want that kind of explosivity, but I think we can't guarantee now the formation that Ange Postecoglou is going to use. So in terms of safety, I will still go for James Maddison here. And then for Phil Foden, we definitely need to double up on Manchester City, so that's why we have Haaland and Foden. Now, a lot of drafts have gone for Haaland and Alvarez, but the reason why I've chosen to go for Foden here is because I think in terms of rotation-wise, Alvarez is slightly more at risk than Phil Foden. Alvarez definitely has started every single game in the first 4 weeks, but I do feel like when Champions League kicks in, we could see a little bit more rotation. Foden plays on the left, in the middle, on the right. He can play anywhere basically, as compared to Alvarez, who mostly plays in the central position. And to be honest, a lot of the fans actually think like he's not great at that position, right? He's slightly better playing as either just behind Haaland as his supporting striker or as a striker alone himself, right? So there is some talk of whether he can potentially drop out of the team and Foden playing in that central Kevin De Bruyne role instead, which is where kind of the forums and the fans actually think Foden plays better than Alvarez. So that's why I think I've gone for Foden here. His numbers are still pretty decent. He looks very sharp as well. And one of the other main reasons I've gone for Foden here is that I want to go for Darwin Núñez up front. And hear me out on this one. Definitely he's not nailed to start. He's probably not going to play 90 minutes every single game as well, maybe 60 to 70 minutes. But the reason why I've gone for him here is because Liverpool's fixtures are pretty good moving forward, right? It's not the best, right, but their fixtures are turning and are looking pretty good. In terms of an attacking perspective, I like the look of Liverpool now. They're kind of gelling better together. I think we're seeing some connections here, especially with Darwin and Salah, and I feel like Darwin Núñez is looking really sharp now, right? Coming off the Game Week 3 performance against Newcastle, Game Week 4, he picked up 2 assists as well, but definitely could have gotten so much more returns. So in terms of this pick, I feel like I would only go for him, and I have him here because Liverpool will be the early kickoff. So Wolves versus Liverpool is the early kickoff for Game Week 5. So we will potentially get some early team news, and if that's the case, and we know that Darwin starts, I think I would have him in my Game Week 5 draft. So that's kind of why I've also gone for Foden there to still double up on Man City as well. Now for the other options on the bench that I haven't spoken about, it is Morris. Now Morris is I feel one of the best assets to go for if you want to target the double Game Week 7. Now Luton will be playing Everton and Burnley, right? And the thing is, I think Morris, in terms of an asset, speaking about him FPL wise, he looks pretty decent because he's nailed for 90 minutes. He's pretty cheap at 5.5. You can bench him for most weeks, just like this week here in Game Week 5 that we're going to bench him. And in general, he's on penalties as well. So he's kind of the main man for Luton Town. And in general, he's already picked up 1 goal from a penalty and 1 assist as well. So in terms of returns and the expected goal involvement that he's getting so far, it's not the best, but I think it looks decent enough to make him one of the best options for Game Week 7 if we want to target that Luton double game week, right? So this is my Game Week 5 draft. As I mentioned, the team value is 100.5 million. Of course, if you can't afford some players, you can downgrade some players. The main one that I would look to downgrade is maybe Trippier to Fabian Schär, and that would free up loads of funds already. So there we go with this draft. Let me know what you guys think. I'll be keen to know what you think of some of the differentials here in this draft, as well as let me know your thoughts on double Game Week 7 and whether it's influencing your decision to wildcard in Game Week 5 as well. Let me know down in the comments below. Hopefully this draft and this video is useful for you guys. If you guys enjoyed it, please drop a like and also subscribe as well. We're trying to hit 5,000 subscribers, so I hope to get there before the Game Week 5 deadline. But if not, thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys in more Game Week 5 content coming very soon. Bye bye.